Okay, so we finally got to the concepts which I talked about. This is something that is very central to the type of framework that I'm talking about. So we've gotten to the concepts of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Very interesting concepts. The way I look at them, these are very universal concepts, and there's so much depth to their interaction and their selves as well. I think there's so much to be said about this. So I hope I can talk about at least to some extent that I can start describe the way I sort of think of these concepts. Okay, so um, wow, suddenly I'm blank now. Okay, so let's start with the way you would think of the ideal male masculine form. Think of all the qualities that are present. um, think of all the things that all the various idealistic descriptions that you would apply to think of the divine masculine, or think of the divine feminine. Think of all the idealistic descriptions and qualities that you could attribute to the divine feminine. Think of or do think of the imagine them in a physical form. Think of the masculine, the ideal masculine form. Think of the ideal feminine form. Think of the way they they form a union. Think of what qualities and what emotions the way they bind to each other between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Think and with previously the way I talked about the arcs, think of between the divine feminine and divine masculine. Think of the qualities of romance. Think of the friendship. Think of the intelligence between them. Think of in what ways they have fun and chaotic fun. You can think of the way they inspire each other. Think of the way how much they can make each other feel amazing. So to think of the ways they can make each other laugh and make each other happy, and to share that joy and laughter and that love, and think of the lust that exists between the divine feminine and divine masculine. Think of the way they desire each other. Think of that romance that exists, that the intensity of that romance. We are imagining ideal forms. Now, like I said, the concept of ideal is somewhat related to the concept of perfection. And I'm not saying that you need to be imagine everything as perfect and expect in this three-dimensional existence for everything to work out perfectly. I think that is somewhat that is not constructive to think of it in that way. So when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about it in a way that ideals and perfection inspire us. We might never get there. We might, in certain glimpses, we might just sort of go in and touch perfection. We might just go in and just for a second become an ideal. And that is sort of the point of imagining these things as perfect, to chase perfection, even if you're never able to grasp onto it. There might be a point where you might just go in there and touch it. I think it's an incredible emotion that such a thing would do. So in that way, I'm talking about ideals. I know this can be kind of tricky in the way that if this something is so amazing, and if we might find it so difficult, it shouldn't be something that demoralizes us. Never. I think it cannot. I think it couldn't. I think it's a pessimistic way to look at it, and I think we should never look at it in that way. It should always be seen in a way that this is sort of what we are meant for. there is a higher self within us, and these ideals speak to these things within us. In that sense, there might be that perfection that already exists amongst ourselves. And that's maybe in that sense, when you look at this ideal, you look at the ideal of the divine feminine, divine masculine, and there are these concepts of divine feminine, divine masculine within us that sort of connects with, and there are these perfections that are sort of connecting with each other. So I think it's something very positive to think of it in that way, to think of these ideals. And like I said, between the feminine and masculine, there is also that devotion towards each other. There is that love in which which creates that bond between them. The way they, um, how would I describe it? The way they love each other. There is something. There is. Hmm, I think there is a very. Uh, there, kind of getting. I'm kind of at a loss for words to how to describe this. Hmm. Wow, what was I even talking about? Yeah. So, it, to just attempt to describe this with words, I, I'm finding it sort of difficult to grasp onto this, let alone describe this with words. So I'm going to try anyway, but you can try to imagine it in that way. Try to imagine it in a more less of a linguistic way and more of an idealistic way in your sense, using the ideal of that. So the way they love the divine feminine, divine masculine, the way they love each other, there is a divine element to it. There is something much greater to this love. There's something that is very, there's something about this love that transcends reality in a sense. You can think of it in that way. There is that divinity in that love. There's something really amazing in that love, and this love can inspire us. So, yeah, these are some of the thoughts that I wanted to. Yeah, you might have lots of different ways of thinking about them. So, uh, think of all the interactions. You can take the pantheon. Take these different gods and goddesses. Think of the archetypes. Think of these. Yeah, think of Um, um, these archetypal characters. You can sort of think of them in the concepts of divine feminine and masculine, in how they interact, uh, and what sort of dynamics they can create. So it's interesting to think of them in that way. So yeah, these are just some thoughts on this concept. Like I said, I'm just finding it too difficult to sort of get into this, but there is something very universal about this, uh, between this interaction between divine feminine and masculine. So, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm going to get onto some of the other thoughts now, on, yeah, some other thoughts to talk about. Okay.